and the Hill. Thank you for joining us on a beautiful Friday afternoon. You know, it is my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce this afternoon a good friend and colleague, Mr. Alfonzo Alexander, who serves as the Chief Relationship Officer for the National Association for the State Boards of Accountancy and is the President of the Center for the Public Trust. Mr. Alexander's visit was facilitated by Beta Gamma Sigma, which is tapping week. Is anyone here tapped this week for Beta Gamma Sigma? Would you raise your hand if you were? A few people out there. So congratulations on that. Thank you, Shane. And we also are delighted to have this supported by Beta Alpha Psi, which is our accounting honorary society, our PEAK program, the Professional Education Knowledge Program, and Mr. Bill Ragland, who donated a significant amount of his retirement funds to support ethical issues and leadership for our students and faculty. He believed that ethical leadership is a lifelong endeavor and a value to our students. I'd like to also mention another visitor from NASBA, the Center for the Public Trust. Ms. Sydney Shearer is with us. She's Mr. Alexander's colleague. Where is, there she is. So give her a hand, please, for being with us. As a Chief Relationship Officer, Mr. Alexander leads the Office of Relationship Development, where he provides strategic leadership to NASBA's Communication, Marketing, and Meetings Department. He also oversees the leadership development and employee engagement activities for the organization. While facilitating a number of special projects working with the CEO, he is a significant leader on the International Board of Governors for Beta Gamma Sigma. We are colleagues on that board, and I can tell you that when he speaks, the board members listen very carefully. His advice is always on target, and I'm sure this afternoon he'll provide some of those pieces of advice for all of us. He recently was a featured speaker at Beta Gamma Sigma's Global Leadership Summit in Dallas, and it's from that I asked him to come and visit with us today with a similar message about ethical leadership. He left Orlando, Florida this morning at 6 a.m. to be here with us after speaking last night. So you know that he's in demand and also willing to provide advice to students and faculty. He is a business graduate of Tennessee Tech University, and he earned his MBA from Lipscomb University while he completed his executive education program at the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania. He is certified through several organizations as a facilitator and a certified professional coach. He has a passion for working with his community and giving back. He serves on the audit and executive committee of the board of directors of the Memorial Foundation, and he's the chairman of the board of the 100 Black Men of Middle Tennessee. He is a member of the 2016-17 Leadership Nashville class. You will find his message to be insightful, useful, and really touching. Please give a rousing hilltopper welcome to my friend and colleague, Mr. Alfonzo Alexander.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Can you guys hear me okay? Wonderful, wonderful. Dean Cass, thank you so much for that overwhelming introduction. I'm glad to be here and excited about the opportunity to come and share some things with you that I'm very passionate about. And that's leadership, but not just the traditional thought of leadership, but leadership in a way that I think is truly sustainable leadership. Hence the topic of my conversation with you today is ethical leadership, the only true sustainable leadership. And what I mean by sustainable leadership is not something that is centered around what we think about from an environmental standpoint when I talk about being sustainable in our leadership. It's really focused and centered around an individual and how an individual can lead in a way that when decisions are made by that individual can be confident that there's no one that's going to catch up with them and find out what they've been doing wrong, because they've made decisions based on what they think is best for their organization, for other stakeholders, and not necessarily just for them. So sustainable leadership is the kind of leadership where you're doing things that you believe are the right thing to do for the greater good, and you don't have to question or wonder if you're going to be found out. That's very important in this time today that we live in, particularly from a business standpoint, because there's so many companies out there that are looking for leaders that they can be proud of, leaders that they have enough respect for, that they can trust to lead their organizations. And I think it's so critically important for you because you're getting ready to enter into a marketplace. You're getting ready to begin your careers. And one of the things that you need to know and understand is that you're going to experience all types of leaders as you go throughout your career, all types of circumstances, all types of experiences. And the best thing that can be done for you right now is for you to be prepared for the good and the bad that you will experience. So the time that we'll spend together today is going to be short, but I hope that it's something that will go with you as you start your career, because I want you to be better than I was when I graduated from college. And what I mean by that is I graduated from college prepared for many things, but I wasn't prepared to face an ethical dilemma that I faced 4 months into my career. I ran into a negative situation, didn't even realize it, didn't know how to deal with it, and I failed 4 months into my career because I thought I knew everything that I was going to face, but I didn't. So my number one objective today is to prepare every student here to at least know how to recognize and understand the situation so that you can be prepared before you get into it. And I've got some slides to help me. The first thing I'll say is ethical dilemmas will come early in your career. And for some of you, they may come often. There's a lot of statistical data, a lot of research that's been done out there, and everything that I've seen shows either somewhere between 80 and 100% of young professionals will face some type of ethical dilemma or witness some type of ethical dilemma within their first 2 years on the job. 80 to 100%. In fact, there's one study that I saw that actually gave it a solid number of 83. So that means if it's 100 of you in here, only 17 of you will not run into some kind of ethical dilemma your first 2 years in your career. That means that this is important. That means it could be challenging, and it means it's something that you should pay attention to. For those of you that don't get yourselves in the right environments, then they could come often. And so we'll talk about that as well. But again, my objective is to make you better than me. There's a study that I like to talk about that was done by a group out of Harvard. And what they found by interviewing and surveying individuals that were in their first 5 years of their career, they found that many of those individuals found or had an experience in a situation with 4 themes. And those themes are here listed. The first is that those individuals were not prepared for and shocked by the prevalence of unethical behavior or negative decisions that were being made in the marketplace. They just were not ready for that. Blown away, shocked, surprised by it. Secondly, they couldn't believe how good people justified bad behavior. These were people that they worked with. These were people that trained them, individuals that they had done things with as they started their career. They knew they were good people, but then they saw them participate in some things that weren't good, and they couldn't believe how they justified bad behavior. They didn't understand how powerful market forces were when individuals and leaders and others in companies were dealing with things that were changing in the market. Let me give you an example of how that could look. Let me see, this is an opportunity for us to engage here real quick. How many of you guys have a smartphone? Raise your hand. All right, everybody but one person. Okay, got it. All right. How many of you have a Samsung smartphone? All right, raise them high. Dean Cass, these are the smartest students in the room here. That's my choice, my product of choice as well. So, what about an Apple smartphone? Okay, so 20% of this room, roughly, raise your hand for a Samsung product. The other 80% for an Apple. That's consistent with the United States market for smartphones. If you go globally, though, it's reverse. 80% is Samsung and about 20% is Apple. Keep that in mind. How many of you have a BlackBerry? A working BlackBerry. Okay, 0. How many of you have a Motorola? 1. Oh, he's got a flip phone too. Man, that's amazing. Wow. Did you used to work for Motorola? No. Normally there's one that has a Motorola, and usually somebody had an internship or they worked there or something. So now let me ask you a question. And somebody just blurt out the answer to this if you know it. When did the first smartphone hit the market? Somebody take a guess then. What'd you say? He says 2005. It's very close. 2007. It's 2007 is when the first smartphone hit the market. Now, if I had asked that same question in 2007, or even earlier in 2008, possibly even as late as 2009, the vast majority of the room would have raised their hand for either a BlackBerry or a Motorola. Vast majority. So let's say it's 2009. So in 8 years, that market has completely changed. In 8 years, a company that wasn't even in the market now owns 80% of the U.S. market for that product. In 8 years, a company that wasn't even in that market now owns 80% of the world's market for that type of product. So when you are working for BlackBerry or for Motorola and you've dominated this market for many years, because cell phones came out in the late 1980s, and those were dominant players in the market, and then all of a sudden, here are these other two companies that come in and start creeping and taking your market share. And what starts to happen is people start getting tense. Pressure comes. That market, those market forces really start to make people make decisions that unfortunately aren't always the best decisions. And they justify them because they feel like we've got to do this and we'll have to do it one time. And so unfortunately, in many cases, senior level executives know I better not get involved in anything unethical. So who should I involve? Well, let's think about this. Who is the most vulnerable person in the room? That new young person who we just hired, who really wants to be a team player, who really wants to make it in this company. Who is somebody that really, really says they need their job? Maybe it's that young person who's got $30,000 of student loan debt, who needs this job. Maybe it's that person that's afraid to say no because they don't know how it can negatively impact their career. Usually that person is the youngest person in the room. Unfortunately, that person could be sitting in this room today, and it could happen later. I'm saying to you very seriously and very honestly, be prepared. Be prepared to make sure that you protect yourself from something like this that could potentially happen to you. These individuals that participated in this survey were not prepared. The last item you see up there is a lack of deep mentoring. And I think the most important word in that is deep mentoring. Because what happens is you guys are coming from an environment where you've had natural mentoring relationships. Some of you have had great relationships with your parents. Some of you have had relationships with professors and other advisors for things that you're involved in, and you've established mentoring relationships over the years, and those have developed. You'll go to work for companies or firms. They may have mentoring programs, but those relationships don't automatically develop. Even if you're assigned to some type of mentor, time is what is needed to develop those relationships. So when you go into your career, if you don't already have some mentors lined up and you run into something early, you could be in a negative situation and not know how to get out of it. If you don't take anything else from what I share with you today, start now identifying people who are doing things that you want to do in your career, people who you recognize and you believe are successful. Watch them. See how they do things. If you respect and like what they do, go talk to them and ask them what they consider being your mentor. You need to start today finding people that are interested in investing in you and don't have biases because of a company, but they're investing in you today. It'll be great to have a mentor at the companies where you go work. It'd be great to have mentors in other situations, and you should. But make sure that you start now identifying mentors. So if and when you have a negative situation, you've got a deep mentoring relationship that you can already call on. These individuals didn't have that. So the biggest issue, the biggest issue that I want you to get from that is that these things happen. This is very real. And I know because I travel all over the country, as Dr. Cass said, and whenever the topic of ethics or ethical leadership comes up, Students say to me afterwards, man, thanks for coming to talk to me about this because I took an ethics class and I tuned it out. I did just enough to make the grade because that stuff was common sense. Or they say, you know what, they talk about what CEOs and CFOs and chief marketing officers do, and I may become one of those, but if I do, by that time, I'll learn it. Well, I'm here to tell you that you got to shift your thinking because this stuff is real and it happens soon and early in careers. But once you draw a line and say, I'm not one that will be involved in that, they come less. Those situations happen less. But don't be mistaken. Everything that happens from an ethical standpoint isn't something that somebody else causes. I'm going to show you a video, and then I want to hear your thoughts on it. But this video is from someone who actually created a situation herself. Watch this video. It takes about 2.5 minutes, and then we'll talk about it. You have to read on this one as well.
Cover of the book.
Jenna?
Yeah.
Can I talk to you for a moment?
Sure.
Jenna, the comments you made on Twitter today are utterly unacceptable.
I didn't mean to offend anybody.
Unfortunately, we're gonna have to let you go.
You're gonna fire me? I seriously did not mean it like that.
Uh-oh. Oh. What's your answer to that question there? Should one tweet cost a career? I see some heads shaking. Let me hear from somebody. Who's a brave soul that wants to tackle that one? Yes, sir. It depends on what tweets you have. Okay? So it's possible that one could cost a career, but it doesn't have to. Depends on how bad it is. Was that one bad enough? A little gray area to you? Yeah. Think before you tweet. That's a good summation of that. What's another thought? Let me hear from one more person. Yes, ma'am. Right. So insensitive in that case, and the same is here. Jenna is the person in the case, but this is actually a true story, and the person's name was Judith. But she didn't have any real malicious intent when she put that tweet out there. She thought it was a joke. It was a very poor taste joke, but she thought it was a joke. She wasn't really trying to hurt anybody or anything, but she didn't think before she tweeted it. Now, here's what happens, though. She put herself in an ethical situation. An innocent, she thought, joke created an ethical situation, but then it also created it for the company as well. As you saw, many companies don't have policies around social media, at least they didn't then. Every day they're adding more and more policies and different things regarding social media. But I think one of the most important things in that is, in this case, she got caught up in a situation where something went viral. So there's always a reaction to something that we do. Every action causes a reaction. And in this particular case, what if the company that she worked for was a retail company that sold clothing? And people knew that she worked for that company. Then all of a sudden now, that company is taking on the image that people have of her. And you saw all the negative tweets that came out as a result of it. So sometimes we can do things very innocently, or at least we think very innocently, and create situations for ourselves. The important message there is we have to think before we act. And we have to have a system set up so that if we find ourselves in a negative situation, we can get us some help as soon as possible through a mentor, through our network of other people. So that was her story. This guy here, his name is Carlos. Carlos, 18 months into his career, got an opportunity to go work for another company. Carlos graduated from college in St. Louis, Missouri, where he grew up. Then he went to work for a large retail company, did very well there. 18 months into his career, the guy who was one of the leaders in the finance area of the company where Carlos worked got an opportunity to go to another company and became the controller of that company. So he was running all of the financial reporting for that particular company. He recruited Carlos and two other people to come work for him at this other company. New opportunity, promotion. Carlos was excited. This guy was like a mentor to him. Carlos goes to work for that company, and then on January 2nd, the guy who brought him down came to him and said, "Hey, Carlos, we've got a transaction that's coming across your desk today where we sold some equipment. It was supposed to close on December 31st. Everything was in place for it to close on December 31st, but it didn't get signed off on until today, which is January 2nd. But when it comes across your desk, need you and your team to make sure it gets recorded as happening December 31st. Oh, by the way, Carlos, this is okay. It's acceptable. It happens in the industry often. The attorney for the other company went on vacation. He's a big LSU football fan. He went to the Sugar Bowl. He left at noon. Our attorney didn't get it to him until 1 o'clock, so he didn't sign it until he got back in this morning, but everything's okay." You know what? You're Carlos. You guys are Carlos here. You just heard that. Guy just came to you and asked you about that. What would you do? Would you record it as December 31st or January 2nd? Think about that for a second. I'm not even going to ask you who the Carloses are in the room that would change the date, because what I know is most people will say, "I would never do that." But here's something else about Carlos. Carlos was a first-generation college student whose family celebrated him like he was a hero when he graduated from college. So he was the hero of the family. And Carlos felt like he had to make that change or he'd have to go home a failure instead of a hero. Second thing about Carlos, Carlos graduated from a university. It was a private university, and he was $40,000 in the student loan debt. So he said, wow, if I don't do this, I'm either going to get fired or I have to quit my job. And if I do that, either one of them, then I'm now not only no longer the hero, but now I'm a burden on my family. So Carlos felt like he had no choice but to go along with what the guy said. Plus, after all, this was a guy who brought him down to this company, whole new state. And when he came, his family came and helped celebrate. They helped him move in. It was like a caravan coming from St. Louis down to this new state. So Carlos felt trapped. So Carlos changed the numbers. 6 months later, Carlos felt guilty. He had researched and found out he shouldn't have done that. So he reported to the SEC, he became a whistleblower, and what he hated and dreaded most was having to go home and deal with the situation. But because he did it, he had to do that anyway. Fortunately for him, he's now recovered and bounced back. He's working, he's doing okay now, but it took him a long time. And if he was standing here before you, he would say that that negatively impacted my career and set me back. If I had just said no, things would have been different. But he was 18 months into his career, so he didn't really know. He didn't really have an avenue. You guys can be different from me. You guys can be different from Carlos. You just got to embrace a few things that we're going to talk about now. The first one is don't cross the line. A big reason why people fail ethical situations and ethical dilemmas is because they do not make a decision before they're even faced with any that here's a line I will not cross. Assignment number 2 for today. Number 1 is to get you a mentor or recruit mentors. Number 2 is to make some decisions about here are some things I don't care who asks me I will not do because they could damage me personally or damage my career. Make those decisions about where your ethics and values and where your morals are today, because you may face some type of situation tomorrow. But if you already are prepared to say, I would never steal money from a company, I don't care if it's one dime. If you already make that decision when somebody comes to you and asks you to do something, or if they do, then you're prepared. So make a decision today that you won't ever cross the line. Whatever your line is, make a decision today that you won't cross it. Because here's the reality. You guys know what this is? It's a bowling lane. And there was one time in my life where I accidentally crossed that line when I was bowling. And here's where I ended up. You know, they give you the little slick shoes. And as long as you're back here, those little slick shoes just slide a little bit. But as soon as you go over there, it's a slippery slope. And I crossed that line and I was over there. I was the gutter ball. Not the ball, I was in the gutter. And so I love that picture because I don't want that to happen to anyone in their career. So make a decision not to cross that line. Here's a quick introduction of a decision-making model that I developed a few months ago on how you can be prepared for ethical decisions. And I would encourage you, take your picture, take a phone, take a picture of this, write it down, do something. But it's the RAISE model for ethical decision making. R in RAISE stands for recognize. First, recognize the problem. You think that's common sense, but most ethical dilemmas happen because people don't recognize that they're in one until it's too late. So first, make sure that you ask questions, make sure that you investigate, have skepticism so you can recognize when you're in an ethical dilemma. The second one is analyze all the facts. It's very easy to make a quick decision about something or to assume that there's either one or two answers, either yes, I do the unethical thing, or no, I don't. Usually there's more options in there, but you got to really analyze and make sure that you have all the facts before you start to make a decision. After that, you identify the possible solutions. Now that you know all the facts, identify and investigate and see what possible solutions exist for you. And then after you've identified all of the possible solutions, you weigh the pros and cons of those, now you select the best course of action. Once you've made that selection, now you've got to execute. And oftentimes people think the execution part is easy. I've gone through a process, I've made a decision, here's what I'm going to do. It's easy for me to execute. That's not necessarily the case. There was a large case of fraud, corporate fraud that happened about 15 years ago, company MCI WorldCom. 2 people that were implicated in that who were lower level employees who were assigned to make transaction changes. When the investigation was done, about 5 years later, and the FBI and the SEC seized their computers and started looking to research what was happening, they found resignation letters for individuals that were involved in this, lower level individuals. They had gone through a process. They decided, we can't do this. They typed up resignation letters, but they didn't have the courage to execute. You could look that up, MCI WorldCom. They both went to jail for about 15 months each because they didn't have the courage to execute. So I would say to you, Figure out a model that will keep you from crossing the line. This is one I suggest you use. It works for me. I use it every time I come into some type of ethical situation. I think it can be helpful to you as well. So here's some things I'm going to share with you that I think will put you in a position to where it may not even ever be an issue for you as it relates to dealing with ethical issues. So there's tips that I'm going to give you that I consider to be the keys to success. 3 words: performance, image, and exposure. I call it the success pie, the ethical leadership pie. The first one, performance. Performing with integrity opens doors for you. If you perform well, it will create more opportunities for you to do bigger and greater things. If you perform well and perform with integrity, it will show people that you're one that's going to do well, you'll have success, but you're going to do it the right way, and it will attract people to you. This guy right here is a great example of that to me. His name is Ken Chenault. He's the president and CEO, or chairman and CEO of American Express. He built a reputation because they put him in the worst performing areas and he turned them around. The CEO job at American Express was his 17th job at that company, and he accredits it to performance. So I'll let him tell you in his own words.
One of the points when I was growing up that my father emphasized with me was focus on what you can control. And the only thing you can control is your performance. There's several ways you can look at that. He was not saying that to limit me. What he was saying was that opens up a range of opportunities. And from an accountability standpoint, don't, in fact, run away from that problem or challenge or barrier. Figure out a way to jump over it.
Figure out a way to jump over a barrier. Perform. The only thing that you can control is your performance. Regardless of what other people do around you, regardless of how people respond, what you can control is your effective performance. That's from a guy that's a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, multi-billion-dollar company, who started at the bottom and worked his way up through the top. He says the bottom line for him is performance. This gentleman here is retired now, but he won the CEO of the century prior to his retirement. The thing that impresses me most is not necessarily what his performance did for him, but what it did for people after him. There were 16 people on his leadership team that became CEOs of other companies after his retirement at some level. All of them that went to publicly traded companies, the day they were named the CEO of that company, the stock went up of that company because they came from a legacy of leadership that this guy started at GE, Jack Welch. He did great there. He took GE to where it was the most admired company for about 10 of his 20 years that he was a CEO. But what happened after that is what impresses me so much. In fact, part of what he did was he created a learning and development system at that company where now they have named the training facility for GE after him. It's the Jack Welch Training Facility up in New York. He opened doors not only for himself, but his performance was so great that it opened doors for others behind him. So the first word is performance. Open doors for you and open doors for others. The second is image. An image isn't what you look like. Image is how others see you or how they view you. And that view is not just a physical image. It is an image that's broader than that. It gets into your brand, your personal brand, your reputation. You need to make sure that you build a brand that is based on people feeling like you are one of the highest level of integrity, because the image they have of you is going to become something that you have to live with for the rest of your life. When Dean Cass introduced me today, you developed some type of image of me, good, bad, or indifferent. He told you some things, so you started developing an image of me before I came up here. You have an image of me now. When I leave, you will have some image of me, good, bad, or indifferent. You're going to think something of me, and that's what image is about. This lady right here is Indra Nooyi. She's the CEO of PepsiCo. She is known in corporate America as the visionary, as the architect, as the Iron Woman. People on the board of PepsiCo and in the senior management have said that they like the fact that the company's brand is associated with her personal brand. Her personal brand is so powerful and so strong that she's the person who called Roger Goodell and said, if you guys don't do something about domestic violence that's happening with your athletes in the NFL, then we're going to pull all of our ads. And that got their attention. She's respected. Her image is tremendous. She turned Pepsi around. Coke was killing them. They were just a little beverage company. Now it's a big conglomerate that owns beverages. They own restaurants, other food products, and everything. She's the leader and driver behind that, and she built an image based on being one that does things and acts out of integrity and has a high ethical standard and a tremendous work ethic. But image is even bigger than that. And here's what's very important, I think, for you. This picture that you see here reminds me of a meeting that I was in about 5 years ago now, 6 years ago now. I'm in a meeting, it's 9 of us in total, senior management team of our company. We've got 57 people in our IT department and 29 positions have to go away. We'd sold a part of a business so they didn't need IT support anymore. We'd finished some projects so there wasn't a need for some IT support for those areas. So we had to eliminate 29 positions. 29 people had to be laid off. We're going down through everybody's name in alphabetical order. And it dawns on me when we get to L that my best friend from college, his last name is P, and he's in the IT department at this same company. I was in his wedding, he was in my wedding, I know his wife, his kids, and I'm sitting here saying, whoa, I'm potentially about to be a part of maybe him losing his job. How am I going to handle this? Well, from an ethical standpoint, I couldn't speak up for him because our work didn't intersect. So if I said something, then it would automatically be because he was my friend. But for someone to keep their job, a person in the room had to speak up for them and say, I think that person should stay, and here's why. Ladies and gentlemen, this happens every day in corporate America. It's happening right now in more than one company. Senior level executives are making decisions about people and their careers because things change. Companies grow, companies shrink, people have to make decisions. The most important thing that you can do is you can have an image in your company to where the key decision makers say, I trust that person to be in front of my clients. I trust that person who is a manager to manage and lead other people in our company. That's what image is about. It's a brand. It's a reputation that you have. You've got to make sure that the key people know you and trust you. When we got to the P's and this person's name came up, a lady said, you know what? He does great work, but more importantly, he has the attitude and the service, and that's what we need at this company. His attitude, we cannot let get out of here. I said, thank you, God. Because I didn't want to have to face his wife. But what that taught me was his performance got him in the door. But the attitude that he had, which is part of his image, that's what kept his job that day and kept me from getting beat up by his wife. It's that important that you build the right image. That can happen to any of us. This is a story of a guy, extra credit, I call it. That's Aaron on the left. That's him day one. That's him 22 years later. First day on the job, a gentleman gave him extra credit. Gentleman said, hey, come to this meeting with me. This was his boss. Come to this meeting with me. I'm making a presentation to the senior management team. He went. They made the presentation. He said to the senior management team, the boss did, I'm glad you guys like this presentation because Aaron and I stayed up all night working on it. The night before, Aaron was at home with his wife. Aaron had not seen the presentation until then. This guy gave him extra credit. It was a test. It was a test to see if Aaron would lie for him or go along with his lie. Fast forward to this point, that's Aaron going to his sentencing hearing. There's a company called Health South that is in Birmingham, Alabama. Aaron's old boss, and he became the founders of that company because of that presentation that happened at Aaron's second day on the job. They were able to start that business, and then they were able to spin that business off that became Health South. Aaron, if he were standing here today, and he's told me on more than one occasion that he was a coward. He didn't have the courage to say, oh, wait a minute, don't give me that extra credit because I didn't do anything. What he should have done is he should have gone to his boss later outside the meeting and said, you know what, if I don't earn it, don't feel like you have to give it to me. And then that boss would have known he's not somebody that I can trust to lie or get to lie for me. But he didn't do that. So it caused that slippery slope. And Aaron ended up going to jail 20-something odd years later for his role in fraudulent behavior in that case. And so now Aaron can't work for a company anymore. He has a lawn care service where he's mowing lawns for a living. And I have to be honest, from an ethical standpoint, that's really not Aaron. I needed to find a young guy with a beard. So that really is Aaron. That's image. But again, to emphasize, image isn't just what you look like, because these are the same people. And if we make the mistake of just going by the physical appearance and making that the image that we have of a person, then we miss the boat. We miss a gem. This reminds me of a guy that I know whose name is Andy, who is a great business person. But Andy is also a musician. He's a drummer. And so at night, he plays in a band, and he dresses like this. During the day, he dresses like that. I can draw conclusions that could be wrong about Andy if I take and draw a conclusion about either one of those. That's why image is bigger than just what you look like. You have to be authentic, and we have to get to know people. Look at this one, and this is a negative image I want to show you. That's definitely true in my house. I show that to show and to say, ladies, there's some negative images out there that aren't fair. Work hard to overcome them. I grew up in a single parent household. My mother raised me by herself, and she worked as hard as any man ever. And you guys have to build and protect your image, ladies, because some things are out there that just aren't fair. Make sure that you build and protect your image. Last word is exposure. You guys repeat, help me finish this sentence. It's not what you know, but it's who you know. From now on, let's add something to it. It's not what you know, but it's who you know and who knows you. I referenced earlier, key decision makers have to know who you are. The way they know who you are is you get involved in things. You have to be committed to being a lifelong learner. You have to be committed to building a strong network. You've got to build a network of other people who are ethical, who are people that are serious about making decisions that are integrity-based decisions. You've got to get mentors. I also challenge you to be a mentor. Go find a high school student and mentor them. You will learn so much about what's going on, even about yourself, by mentoring other people. And it helps you to be accountable. I've got hundreds of people that I've said, yes, I will be your mentor, and they call on me from time to time. And I have to make sure that I'm sharing things with them that I'm really doing, or I'm not doing them a service and I'm being hypocritical. But as I focused on earlier, you also have to get mentors. Being a lifelong learner is very, very important. This guy here is Jim Patton. Jim was working as a manufacturing repairman at a company, and the company was purchased by another company. He went to his boss and he said, mergers and acquisition, explain that to me. I don't know what it is. His boss said, I don't have time right now, Jim. You can read about it in the Wall Street Journal. Jim then goes to the library to check out the book, The Wall Street Journal. The librarian laughs at him and says, son, that's a newspaper. You can read that every day. He took her literally. He started reading the Wall Street Journal every day. If you Google today, the billion with a B, $1 billion repairman, you will see a picture of Jim and some articles about him. Or if you Google his name, you'll see his nickname in corporate America is $1 billion repairman. He became somebody that became infatuated with learning how to do mergers and acquisitions. He taught himself. He lost everything he owned on his first deal. And then now he has made and he's done over $3.9 billion worth of transactions. $3.9 billion. That's his book right there. And in his book, he's got the whole formula in there. I read the book. I can't figure out how to do it, but it's in there. But I'll tell you, his nickname is a billion-dollar repairman because $3.9 billion worth of transactions, and his formula is set to where he gets 50% of the deal. So I think that's $1.95 billion that he's made over a course of 26 years doing that. And it's all because he made a commitment that he's going to be a lifelong learner. He still reads the Wall Street Journal 6 days a week. This was the last person I want to share with you information about. I think her story is fascinating. She's going to be in management books soon. Mary Barra, she's the CEO of General Motors. What's fascinating to me is she made a commitment to being a lifelong learner, and she did it by learning about all of these as she progressed to become the CEO of General Motors. And she wasn't doing it to become the CEO. She was doing it to gain the experience and knowledge she needed and was committed to being the best that she could in each role that she had. She worked in finance, HR, engineering, plant management, and procurement. And listen to what she has to say about that. I don't know if I did something wrong there.
In 1980, Barra's first job at GM, inspecting Pontiacs coming off the assembly line. Gaining trust, she quickly moved up the ranks in the historically male-dominated industry.
You didn't think, no, I could be the CEO of this company someday?
I stayed focused on the job I was doing. That's the truth.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. And I think sometimes, in industry, people are too focused on the next job as opposed to the job they're really doing. And that's been my focus.
But for all the gender talk, Barra would much rather focus on the car.
I've never approached it from that perspective. I've just, go in, work hard, do what needs to be done, build a strong team.
What does it say to the American auto industry and the American people to see a woman on top?
When I started here 33 years ago, I had no idea this is the role I would be playing, but I approached every position like I was going to do it for the rest of my life. So I think that's a very strong message about hard work pays off.
Hard work pays off. She worked in all of those areas, and her focus was to make sure that she did as good a job as she could in each of those areas. She built a strong team. That means she built a network of people to help her execute on what her plan was. And hard work pays off. Exposure, part of it is doing the best you can where you are so that you can grow. Performance, image, and exposure. If you do these things and do them with integrity, you do them in a way that you build your personal brand where people know that you're going to try your best to do what's right, and you position yourselves to be an ethical leader more so than anyone else you're competing with. You position yourself to be a sustainable leader, one that you don't have to worry if something is going to come and catch up with you because you've done things right the first time. You're more efficient because you don't have to go back and clean up and fix things that you've already done. I encourage you to make sure that you make it as a part of your plan starting today for the rest of your career to make your goal to be a sustainable leader, and it will lead to great success for you. Thank you so much for allowing me to come here, and I'm done with my presentation, but I'll be happy to open up and answer any questions because that's the part I like most. So if you have some, please shoot them at me. I'd love to hear them. Thank you, guys.
First of all, thank you.
Thank you.
And we do have time for questions, so we have a microphone if you need it. Let's see that.
Yes, sir. I actually have four. I've got one guy that I've known since I was a senior in high school who has been a CEO of a company, and he is my go-to person for business-related things. The guy that I mentioned, Jim, the billion-dollar repairman, he's my mentor from a spiritual standpoint. I've got a guy who I respect what he's done with his marriage, and so he's my marriage mentor, and he has to work hardest with me. Don't tell my wife I said that. And then I have a financial mentor. So I've identified people that I think are experts in certain areas, and I've recruited them to be my mentor. Yeah, great question. Thank you. I saw another hand over here somewhere, I think. Oh, you did? Okay. All right. He's getting the microphone, then I'll come to you.
I appreciate it. I appreciated the video of the woman working and hitting the glass ceiling equivalent. And after the video, you kind of challenged the women to not settle for that image. I was expecting a rebuke for the men, and you didn't make that. That something
I should have. We need to be fair, men. It's totally unfair for us to develop these images of women that aren't true, because there's so many more capable women in the world than we give them credit for. Would you like to continue, rebuke? Please do, because I think it's wrong.
That was a little soft on your end, but I agree with it.
Hammer it. You. Thank you. I'll make sure that I do that moving forward, because it's not good. Not good at all. Yes, sir. The first job I ever, like the first professional job, or my first job, period? My first job I ever had, I was 10 years old, and I was a brick cleaner. So back then, whenever somebody was building houses and they did the cement, then oftentimes the bricklayers would spill some of that on bricks. And somebody would have to come back with some very dangerous acid and scrub the bricks and then spray it off. And that acid would eat up the cement. And at 10 years old, my cousin and I worked for my uncle, who was a brick cleaner by trade, and we went out in the hot sun all day long and cleaned bricks. And I thought then what I learned was, I'm going to college and I'm going to be the boss, because I don't want to have to do this for the rest of my life. So that was it. Yes, sir. Excellent question again. Thank you for your question as well. What happened in that situation is what fuels me to go do this now. As Dean Cass mentioned, I spoke in Orlando twice yesterday and flew back here this morning, and I'm not tired, because I'm energized when I get a chance to engage with students and talk about this. And I'll tell you, it wasn't, when I tell you the dollar amount, you're gonna be like, really? But that company was a Fortune 500 company. They had a policy: if you travel and you have an expense that's less than $75, you don't have to have a receipt for it. And so 3 different guys came to me separately and said, hey, you know that policy that you don't have to have a receipt? That's so that we can take advantage of a benefit that the company gives us. And so go to McDonald's or somewhere, get you something to eat, and then go somewhere else and have you some drinks and all that. And when you come back and fill out your expense report, then just charge it up to cover the cost of that. Even, if you want to go buy a souvenir for your wife or kids or anything, do that. Just make sure you don't exceed the $75. This company just happened to be number 6 on the Fortune 500 company listing for best benefits of all, companies. So when they first told me, it went completely over my head. I'm from Murfreesboro, Tennessee originally. I've been on a plane one time prior to that, and the headquarters was in Chicago. I was focused on going to Chicago. Then we went and ate. We all went out and drank. And so then I came back and cheated on my expense report. I had 2 items on there that I did on that one trip, and it totaled up to $70. That was in 1994. But that plagues me today. It fuels me actually to come and talk to you guys about that, because one other guy did the same thing, and he kept doing it, and it killed his career. So I'm fortunate that I stopped that one time. My mentor helped me navigate through that situation, and I've never done that again. So that's what happened with me. You didn't ask me all that, but I felt like I should say it. All right. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Most things are and one example. Talk a little bit about.
Don't do that. Here's what I believe, and this may not be true for you guys, but this is what I believe. I mentioned earlier I played football in college. There's a guy who is a brilliant guy. His father was a chemical engineer at Dow. He came from Syracuse or Rochester, New York, down to Cookeville, Tennessee, played football. He and I were very good friends. Our last 2 years in college, we took almost every class together because we had the same major. When we were in class, we always had a little competition. Who's going to make the best grade? Several of us. He was one of them. This guy, for some reason, decided at some point that he was going to make the grades by cheating. So he would figure out a scheme to cheat in every class, every single class. And I told him once, I said, man, why you're putting the energy that you're putting into that, you could just be studying. You're spending too much time, wasting too much time doing this. No, I got it. You watch, my grade will be higher than yours. So fast forward, he got his master's degree, and then he started cheating in another way. He started selling drugs. This guy with a master's level degree selling drugs. He became a big drug dealer, and then I moved away for 15 years. I moved back to Middle Tennessee. He was living in Nashville at the time. I ran into his wife one day, and then the next day, I saw on the news he got arrested for drug trafficking. He spent 17 years in jail. I saw him 6 months ago. He just got out. And I believe that he developed in his mind an attitude that cheating was okay, and it just snowballed on him. So I don't care who brings it to you, don't do it. He brought it to me one time, and I wanted to do it, but I was scared, so I didn't do it. And so I'll just say, don't do it, because it can snowball into something much bigger than you ever think. And I'm not saying that if you're cheating, you're going to turn into a drug dealer. But what I am saying is sometimes things can get out of control, and you feel like that is the only way that you can overcome a hurdle, and people cheat. So don't do it. It's not worth it. Just put in the work and do it the right way, and then you learn something too. When you cheat, you don't learn other than how to get over, and it'll catch up to you. Yes, ma'am. Her question was, do I see the ethical standards changing? How do I answer that? I'm trying to answer that without giving some examples that are political. So that's my struggle there. I think ethical standards are set, but then culturally sometimes people shift them, and that's where the danger can come in. I think that it was laid out a long time ago what's right and what's wrong, but sometimes people can manipulate them, because when you hear things like alternative facts, that's an oxymoron. So people are doing things now that I teach my kids, and I was taught as a kid was wrong to do. And so I don't think the standard is shifting, but I do think